Have you ever wondered why a man can desire you, want you, even love you, yet still keep emotional walls around his heart? Why he can share a bed, a home, a life, yet hesitate to share what's going on inside him? This happens because for many men, vulnerability has never been a safe place. They were taught to be strong, to be silent, to be steady, and the very emotions that make intimacy rich are the same emotions they were told to hide, so they walk through life armored, not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to open. Have you noticed how quickly a man closes up the moment he feels criticized or misunderstood? It's almost instantaneous. One word, one tone, one look, and suddenly the openness you thought you had created disappears. That's because emotional safety for men doesn't begin with being told what to feel, or being analyzed, or being fixed. It begins with understanding. Men, more than most, are wired to protect themselves from judgment. They have been taught, often from childhood, that showing emotion is dangerous, that weakness is punished, that vulnerability is risky. And so when you step into a space where he feels seen without the threat of criticism, something remarkable happens. His guard starts to lower. Understanding doesn't require agreement. You don't have to fix his problems, explain them away, or tell him what he should do. You simply reflect, acknowledge, and validate. I see you, you might say. I hear what you're going through, and it makes sense that you feel that way. That small act, that recognition of his internal experience signals safety. It says, you are allowed to be human here. And for a man who has spent decades learning to hide his feelings, that is profound. Judgment, on the other hand, triggers instant contraction. It doesn't matter if your words are gentle, if your tone is soft. If he perceives criticism, his walls go up. You've just moved from being a source of comfort to a source of risk. And once a wall goes up, even the most subtle touch, the most sincere compliment, the most patient attention, none of it reaches him. Understanding, not judgment, is the key that unlocks the emotional threshold. This is why women over 50 hold such an advantage. You've lived long enough to know that rushing, controlling, or fixing someone rarely works. You understand the power of patience and the subtlety of presence. You know that it's not your job to make him feel safe. Your job is to create an environment where he can choose to feel safe. And the choice is his. When he feels understood, he feels a quiet invitation to be real. When he fears judgment, he retreats into the armor he knows best. Think about the last time you truly felt understood. It was probably a moment when someone looked at you, listened to you, and didn't try to change you, correct you, or lecture you. You felt lighter, freer, even braver in that moment. That is exactly what men crave. And here's the catch. Most women, even unintentionally, ask men to meet emotional demands before they've earned safety. Tell me how you feel. Explain yourself. Why are you acting this way? The man who is already defensive hears this as a challenge, not a conversation. You may be asking for openness, but your approach is triggering a wall. So how do you shift that dynamic? You start with attunement. You start with listening, truly listening, not half paying attention while scrolling your phone, not waiting for your turn to speak, not scanning for flaws, listening, nodding, breathing, reflecting. That sounds frustrating. I can see why that hurt. I get that this is confusing. These small acknowledgments are emotional mirrors. They reflect back to him the message: you are seen, you are accepted, you are safe. And once he feels that, the rest, his willingness to share, to soften, to connect, follows naturally. It's also crucial to remember that emotional safety is cumulative. One conversation doesn't erase a lifetime of guarded behavior. A man who has been told to man up or stop being sensitive since childhood carries layers of self-protection. Each interaction where he feels understood chips away at those layers. Each touch that is gentle, each word that is patient, each moment of presence reinforces the signal that it's safe to be real. Over time, the walls he's built brick by brick begin to loosen. He starts to take risks emotionally, not because you forced him, but because he feels understood and therefore unafraid. Now, let's consider the role of language and tone in this process. It's not just the words themselves, but the delivery. A man can hear words of understanding and still feel judged if your tone carries impatience, frustration, or expectation. Your energy communicates whether your intent is nurturing or controlling. Men are wired to read these signals immediately. A soft tone, calm presence, and slow, deliberate speech communicate safety far more powerfully than the words themselves. You can say, I understand, but if your body language is tense, your voice clipped, your hands restless, the message is lost. Emotional safety is as much about how you communicate as it is about what you communicate. Physical presence amplifies this. A gentle hand on the arm while listening, a reassuring touch on the shoulder, even proximity without intrusion. All these subtle forms of touch say, I am here, you are safe, you don't have to protect yourself from me. When paired with verbal understanding, this touch signals something deep in the nervous system. It's safe to relax. Men's bodies respond to this before their minds do. That's why intentional touch combined with understanding is transformative. It speaks a language older than words. It bypasses the armor and touches the part of him that longs for connection but has forgotten how to trust. Another layer is patience. Emotional safety is not granted instantly. It is earned gradually. You can't demand a man's vulnerability. You can't negotiate trust in a single conversation. Each moment where he feels understood builds the internal cue. I can be myself here. Each moment where he feels judged erodes that cue. Women over 50 often have the patience and perspective to sustain this consistency. You know that the payoff is not immediate but profound. You understand that trust is a slow accumulation, a rhythm of presence, understanding, and reassurance. And here's the beauty. The more a man feels understood, the more he begins to understand himself. He starts articulating thoughts he couldn't before. He shares dreams he thought were too fragile. He softens not because you've broken him down, but because he finally feels safe to stand down. Walls that once seemed immovable begin to crumble, not through confrontation or persuasion, but through the quiet, steady assurance of being understood. Even mistakes become opportunities. When a man missteps, a response rooted in understanding rather than judgment maintains emotional safety. Instead of criticism, you guide gently. I see what happened. I get why it was challenging. This doesn't excuse poor behavior, but it prevents defensive walls from shooting back up. It communicates even when you're imperfect, you're safe here. Men rarely hear that message in their lives. Offering it transforms connection into intimacy. Ultimately, emotional safety for men is about trust. Trust that you will witness their vulnerability without exploitation, ridicule, or manipulation. It's about creating an environment where their emotional truth can exist without penalty. And when that trust is earned, when he feels truly understood, the walls that once guarded his heart begin to dissolve. The man who was cautious, controlled, or distant suddenly shows his authentic self. He becomes present, engaged, and connected. He begins to risk emotion because he has experienced safety. And that, more than anything else, is why understanding, not judgment, is the first and most powerful tool in emotional connection. When you master this, when your presence consistently communicates understanding, men begin to respond in ways that surprise even them. They begin to open, soften, and engage. They begin to trust. They begin to love in ways they never thought possible. Your power as a woman over 50 lies not in changing him, correcting him, or pushing him to be different. Your power lies in creating the space where he can choose to be real. And in that space where understanding replaces judgment, touch replaces distance, and patience replaces pressure, intimacy flourishes not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. Men do not open because you demand it. They open because you make it safe to do so. And when emotional safety is established, vulnerability becomes possible, connection becomes inevitable, and love becomes something that can grow without walls. The next time you sit with him, notice his subtle shifts, the easing of tension in his shoulders, the softening of his eyes, the willingness to speak before he's spoken. These are the signs that your understanding is working, that emotional safety is being felt, that walls are beginning to drop, not because he has to, but because he wants to. This is the essence of true connection, the deliberate, patient, empathetic creation of safety. And it begins with one simple, profound act to see him, hear him, and understand him without judgment. Once that foundation is laid, every touch, every word, every glance carries weight. Every interaction reinforces the message. Here, you can be yourself. Here, you are safe. Here, you are known. Have you ever noticed how a simple touch, just a hand on the arm, a gentle brush of fingers across the shoulder, a grounding hand at the back, can say more than any sentence could? Men are wired to respond to touch in ways that words often cannot reach. It's not about seduction. It's not about physical desire. It's about signaling safety, presence, and emotional connection. Intentional, non-sexual touch bypasses the mental defenses that men have built over a lifetime. It speaks directly to the nervous system, telling him, you are safe here. You don't have to armor yourself. Consider this. Most men grow up learning that emotions are risky territory. They are taught to suppress, to contain, to perform strength and stoicism. Words, no matter how carefully chosen, can trigger scrutiny, expectation, or misinterpretation. Are you judging me? Do I have to defend myself? Am I doing this right? These questions arise subconsciously and immediately activate defensive walls. But touch communicates something older, something primal. It taps into the part of the brain that perceives safety through sensation. A hand on the arm, steady and warm, reassures his body long before his mind can even consider relaxing. It's not about fixing anything. It's about allowing relaxation to happen naturally. This is why intentional, non-sexual touch is so powerful. It carries no agenda beyond presence. It does not demand performance, confession, or explanation. It simply conveys, I see you, you are okay, you are safe. A gentle touch communicates authenticity, attentiveness, and care in a way that words sometimes struggle to capture. And the more consistent and intentional this touch, the faster his defenses begin to lower. Think about the nervous system. When a man feels threatened, socially, emotionally, or psychologically, his sympathetic nervous system activates. He becomes guarded, tense, and hyper-alert. Words may attempt to reason, but reasoning cannot calm a body that feels unsafe. Non-sexual touch, on the other hand, engages the parasympathetic nervous system. It signals safety, calm, and grounding. His body receives the message, relax. You are allowed to be yourself. And once the body relaxes, the mind follows. Emotional openness becomes possible because his defensive system no longer dominates his reactions. The placement and timing of touch matters. A hand on the forearm while he speaks tells him, I am listening, I am with you. A brief touch on the shoulder while walking side by side conveys solidarity. You are not alone. Even a casual, reassuring hand at the small of the back while passing through a doorway communicates protection and acknowledgement. These touches are subtle, often imperceptible in their intention, yet profound in their effect. They bypass the analytical mind, reaching directly to the emotional core. This is particularly potent for women over 50. By now, you have an understanding of rhythm, timing, and energy that younger women are still learning. You know that touch is not about quantity, but quality. A quick, distracted pat on the back does nothing. A deliberate, conscious touch that aligns with presence communicates volumes. It says, I am calm, I am here, I see you, I am safe. And men, more than most, can feel the authenticity or lack thereof in that moment. They can sense when touch is intentional and when it is careless. Non-sexual touch also bypasses mental defenses in ways that conversation cannot. You can ask a man about his feelings, invite him to open up, listen patiently, but if he has been conditioned to guard his heart, those words may meet resistance. He may rationalize, deflect, or disengage. But touch communicates in a pre-verbal language. It does not invite judgment. It does not demand performance. It simply communicates safety and acceptance. And in that space, his heart and mind feel free to respond. Consistency is key. One touch may not shift defenses permanently, but repeated, intentional touches, paired with calm presence and understanding, create a cumulative effect. Over time, his nervous system learns to anticipate safety. He begins to relax, not just in the moment of touch, but in your presence overall. Walls that have been built for years begin to soften because his body associates you with calm, reassurance, and non-threatening attention. Touch also communicates care without needing explanation. Words can be misinterpreted, misremembered, or doubted. Touch is immediate and felt. It conveys empathy and acknowledgement in the purest form when paired with understanding, listening without judgment. It becomes a language that reaches straight to the core. Men recognize it instinctively, even if they cannot articulate why they feel so seen, so grounded, so safe. The magic of non-sexual touch is that it works even before he trusts fully. You do not have to earn complete emotional openness to make a difference. A well-placed, gentle, intentional touch can signal your presence and your acceptance immediately. It softens the body, quiets the mind, and primes the heart. Over time, this creates a fertile ground for connection, vulnerability, and deep intimacy that words alone cannot achieve. Women over 50 can leverage this power because of the maturity, presence, and confidence they carry. You do not need to manipulate, persuade, or push. Your touch itself, slow, deliberate, reassuring, is enough to shift his energy. The more you combine touch with active, non-judgmental listening, the faster his defenses lower, the more relaxed his body becomes, and the more he begins to engage emotionally. Intentional, non-sexual touch teaches men a new language, a language they may have forgotten, never learned, or thought they didn't need. It reassures, calms, and signals that they can finally let down their guard. And once those walls begin to lower, everything changes. Communication deepens, vulnerability emerges, trust flourishes, connection becomes effortless. The takeaway is profound. You do not have to coax him into openness with clever words, debates, or reasoning. You do not have to convince him to share his emotions. You do not have to push or pressure. Intentional, non-sexual touch does the work that words cannot. It lowers defenses, signals safety, and opens the door to authentic emotional connection. And when that door opens, even just a crack at first, you begin to witness the transformation. The man who was once guarded, tense, and distant begins to lean in. His energy softens. He begins to participate, to share, to connect. The space between you changes. Touch has done its work, speaking a language older than intellect, deeper than reasoning, more potent than persuasion. It has created safety, lowered walls, and invited him into the intimacy he secretly craves, but has rarely experienced. This is the remarkable power of touch. Not sexual, not performative, not demanding anything in return, just present, intentional, reassuring touch that communicates you are safe, you are seen, you are accepted. And when you master this art, every interaction carries depth, every moment invites openness, and every connection has the potential to flourish into trust, vulnerability, and profound intimacy. Have you ever noticed how some men seem impenetrable, almost impossible to read? Their emotions are hidden behind carefully constructed walls, their reactions measured, their openness rare. And yet, there are three remarkable places that, when approached thoughtfully, can unlock trust faster than anything else. These are not tricks or manipulations. They are human truths, attention, pride, and the nervous system. Mastering connection in these areas allows a man to feel seen, safe, and ready to lower his walls. The first place is his attention. Attention is more than listening to words. It's presence. It's focus. It's the simple, deliberate act of giving him the full weight of your awareness, even for a moment. When a man knows that his thoughts, his experiences, and his feelings are truly being attended to, something shifts inside him. The mind begins to relax, the heart softens, and trust starts to form. Attention is a form of validation. It signals that what he says matters, that he matters. You can't fake attention. Multitasking, glancing at your phone, or checking the clock while he speaks communicates disinterest, even if your words say otherwise. Men sense authenticity immediately. But when you slow down, make eye contact, and actively listen, mirroring his emotional rhythm, he experiences a rare form of safety. It's a quiet acknowledgement that says, I am here with you. I am not judging. I am listening. That safety is the first brick in the foundation of trust. The second place is his pride, not arrogance, but the deep human need to feel competent, respected, and capable. Pride is a part of identity. When it is recognized, appreciated, and not undermined, it opens pathways to vulnerability. Men often hide their fears, their insecurities, and their emotional needs behind a facade of control or confidence. But when a woman acknowledges his efforts sincerely, without flattery or condescension, she communicates respect for who he is and what he contributes. That acknowledgement tells him, I see you. Your effort matters. Your presence matters. This is subtle but profound. Praise for accomplishment or skill is different from praise for effort and presence. When you notice the little things, the thoughtfulness behind his actions, the way he handles challenges, the consistency of his care, it signals to him that you value his contribution without demanding perfection. That value nurtures trust because he feels recognized in a safe, non-judgmental way. He begins to sense that in your presence, he can let go of posturing and simply be himself. The third place is his nervous system. And this is where the magic of touch and energy comes into play. Men's defenses are not only mental, they are physical. Stress, anxiety, and tension are stored in the body. If his nervous system perceives threat, it triggers fight, flight, or freeze responses. Words alone are insufficient to disarm these reactions. But intentional, non-sexual touch, combined with calm, grounded presence, speaks directly to the nervous system. It signals, you can relax. You don't have to protect yourself from me. Consider the effect of a gentle hand on his shoulder while he talks about a stressful situation, or a reassuring touch at the base of his neck when he seems tense. These gestures communicate safety and calm far more efficiently than logic or reasoning. His body receives the message before his mind does. It's safe to soften. And as his nervous system begins to regulate, he becomes more available to trust, to connect, to engage emotionally. What makes these three places so powerful is that they work together. Attention engages the mind. Pride engages the ego in a safe way. The nervous system regulates the body. When all three align, trust emerges naturally. He doesn't have to be persuaded or convinced. He doesn't have to perform. He simply begins to let down the walls he has relied on for so long. For women over 50, this is particularly potent. You have the emotional intelligence to read his responses, the patience to wait for shifts, and the wisdom to understand timing. You know that connection is a rhythm, not a race. By engaging his attention with presence, honoring his pride with recognition, and soothing his nervous system with intentional touch, you create a space where trust becomes inevitable. Attention is the doorway. Pride is the key. The nervous system is the bridge. Together, they form a pathway that leads him from guarded and cautious to open and present. You don't need to manipulate, question, or demand. You need to observe, acknowledge, and communicate through presence and touch. When you master these three areas, you notice the subtle changes first. The way his shoulders relax when you speak. The way his voice softens when he tells you about his day. The way he leans in when you are near, both physically and emotionally. These are signs that trust is growing. And trust is the foundation of intimacy, connection, and vulnerability. The very things most men long for but rarely experience fully. There is a rhythm to this. Attention must be steady, pride must be honored consistently, and the nervous system must be soothed repeatedly. It's not about one grand gesture. It's about small, intentional moments that build cumulatively. Over time, these moments create an environment where a man feels safe enough to be authentic. He begins to share not because you ask, but because he wants to. He opens not because you pushed, but because he trusts. The beauty of this approach is that it respects his autonomy. Men don't like to feel pressured into vulnerability. They respond to safety, not coercion. By focusing on attention, pride, and the nervous system, you provide an invitation rather than a demand. You create a space where he can choose to lower his walls. And when he does, the connection that follows is deep, genuine, and lasting. This is the power of knowing where to touch a man mentally, emotionally, and physically. You engage his attention, honor his pride, and calm his nervous system. You communicate safety without words, understanding without judgment, and presence without expectation. And when you do this consistently, the walls he has relied on for decades begin to dissolve. He becomes available in ways that surprise even him. This is not manipulation. It is mastery of connection. It is the art of creating trust that allows intimacy to flourish. It is the gift that women over 50 can offer, because with age comes presence. With presence comes awareness. And with awareness comes the ability to touch these three profound places in a man's heart and mind. When you do this, you will notice a transformation. He starts to lean into you emotionally. He shares thoughts he has never voiced. He softens in moments that once triggered tension. He trusts not because he must, but because he finally feels safe. And in that safety, intimacy grows, walls fall, and the depth of connection becomes a daily living experience. The lesson is timeless. Attention opens the mind, pride opens the ego in safety, and the nervous system opens the body. Touch, presence, and acknowledgement work together to invite a man into a space where vulnerability is possible. And when vulnerability becomes possible, trust follows naturally, intimacy deepens, and love flourishes in a way that feels effortless and real. The women who understand this, who act with patience, intentionality, and care, hold an unmatched power. They don't need to chase. They don't need to fix. They simply create safety, honor the man, and engage the body in a way that signals calm and trust. And when they do, they witness something extraordinary. The man who was once guarded and distant begins to open, soften, and connect. These three places, attention, pride, and the nervous system, are the gateways to a man's trust. Engage them consciously, repeatedly, and with authenticity. Trust will emerge. Walls will fall. And the connection that follows will be profound, lasting, and transformative. Have you noticed how some women just command presence without saying a word? How the energy they carry seems to make people, especially men, relax, lean in, and feel seen? Women over 50 have a unique advantage in this arena. It's not about physical appearance or performance. It's about presence, the quiet confidence, the emotional maturity, and the life experience that radiates without effort. And in the world of connection, presence is more powerful than persuasion, more effective than words, and far more lasting than any superficial gesture. By the time a woman reaches her 50 seconds, she has lived through love, heartbreak, disappointment, and joy. She has learned what works and what doesn't, what is worth her time and energy and what is not. She has learned to carry herself with authenticity, to speak without over-explaining, and to act without needing approval. This self-assurance becomes magnetic to men. It signals, I am steady, I am whole, I do not need you to complete me. And paradoxically, that steadiness invites men to lower their guard because they sense that they are entering a space of safety rather than pressure. Presence is not simply being in the same room. It's attuning to the rhythm of the interaction, reading subtle cues, and responding from a grounded, centered place. A woman over 50 understands timing intuitively. She knows when to listen, when to offer insight, when to step closer, and when to give space. This attunement creates an environment where a man feels genuinely understood without having to explain himself excessively. He doesn't feel interrogated or evaluated. He feels seen, recognized, and safe. This advantage also comes from experience with relationships, both successful and failed. Younger women may chase emotional highs or seek immediate validation, which can inadvertently trigger a man's defenses. Women over 50 have often learned patience, discernment, and the value of subtle influence. They know that connection is a slow rhythm, not a rapid transaction. This awareness allows them to engage men on a deeper level without triggering resistance. Another aspect of presence is emotional regulation. Women over 50 have typically experienced enough of life to understand their own emotional landscape. They are less reactive, less likely to be thrown off by minor slights or misunderstandings, and more capable of maintaining calm when tension arises. This steadiness sends a powerful signal to a man. It's safe to be yourself. You do not have to protect me from your emotions or your vulnerabilities. Men respond instinctively to this calmness because it reassures their nervous system, encouraging openness and trust. Presence is also amplified through intentional communication. Women over 50 speak with clarity, conciseness, and authenticity. They don't waste energy on games, manipulation, or overcomplication. Every word, tone, and gesture aligns with their authentic self, creating consistency that men instinctively read as safe and trustworthy. Contrast this with interactions that are chaotic, inconsistent, or performative. The latter triggers caution, doubt, and defensive behavior. The more consistent and authentic the presence, the faster a man relaxes and the deeper the connection grows. Physical presence is part of this equation as well. Not in a sexualized way, but through grounded posture, eye contact, and intentional touch. A calm, centered woman over 50 can make a man feel physically and emotionally safe. Her energy communicates, I am here, I am stable, you are safe to show up as yourself. And when men feel this kind of embodied safety, their walls begin to soften. They experience a kind of trust that is hard to achieve through words alone. Another reason women over 50 hold an advantage is perspective. Life experience teaches discernment, what to invest in, what to let go, and what deserves attention. This wisdom allows them to avoid unnecessary drama and focus on meaningful interaction. Men sense this discernment even subconsciously. It communicates that she is intentional, authentic, and not easily swayed. That perception encourages him to meet her on equal footing, fostering mutual respect and connection. Patience plays a critical role. A woman over 50 understands that connection is cumulative. She doesn't expect instantaneous emotional openness. She knows that trust is built over consistent, small moments of presence, understanding, and reassurance. This patience allows a man to gradually relax, knowing that he is not being pressured, manipulated, or rushed. The cumulative effect of this calm, grounded presence is transformative. It chips away at defenses that may have taken decades to build, creating space for authentic intimacy. There is also a magnetic confidence that comes from knowing oneself. Women over 50 have learned what they want, what they value, and what they will no longer tolerate. This clarity communicates strength without intimidation. Men sense that this is someone who is whole on her own terms. It encourages them to lower their guard, not because they have to, but because they want to engage with someone whose presence feels stable, real, and trustworthy. Presence also allows women to engage with the three places that open a man's trust: attention, pride, and the nervous system more effectively. By being fully present, she can give genuine attention, honor pride without judgment, and soothe the nervous system through calm energy and intentional touch. Presence amplifies the impact of every interaction because it is not superficial or distracted. It is rooted in authenticity, awareness, and intention. This is why men often respond more openly and vulnerably to women over 50 than they do to younger women who may rely on charm, flirtation, or performance. It is not about age alone. It is about presence, groundedness, and the confidence that comes from life experience. Men feel safe, valued, and understood in ways that allow walls to lower naturally. Women over 50 understand that connection is not about chasing intimacy. It is about creating the conditions for intimacy to flourish. Presence becomes the environment in which a man feels safe to be himself. It is the calm in which his defenses begin to soften, the space in which he can exhale, and the context in which vulnerability becomes possible. The advantage of presence is also subtle but undeniable. It communicates security, authenticity, and patience. Men instinctively respond to these qualities because they meet deep, often unspoken needs. They respond not because they are told to, not because they are persuaded, but because presence speaks a language older than words, deeper than logic, and more reassuring than any argument. In essence, women over 50 hold an advantage because presence allows them to connect on levels that bypass superficial defense mechanisms. Their life experience, emotional intelligence, and grounded confidence create an environment where men feel safe to open, to trust, and to engage emotionally. And in that presence, walls that have been built over decades begin to soften, When a woman over 50 brings presence into every interaction, she becomes a calm, stabilizing force. Men are drawn to her not out of obligation, need, or desire for approval, but because she creates a space in which they can finally be themselves. Her presence communicates, you are safe, you are seen, you are allowed to open. And when that space exists consistently, the depth of connection that follows is profound, transformative, and lasting. Presence is more than a skill. It is a living energy. It is the culmination of years of experience, emotional regulation, discernment, and authenticity. When women over 50 wield this presence intentionally, they do more than connect. They create an environment where trust, intimacy, and vulnerability can thrive naturally. It is in this space that real connection happens, defenses dissolve, and love can flourish in its deepest form. The woman who understands the power of presence does not need to convince, chase, or perform. She simply exists with intention, awareness, and steadiness. That alone invites men to relax, to open, and to engage on levels they may never have thought possible. And that is the true advantage women over 50 hold in building deep, lasting connection. The ability to create space for men to show up fully, authentically, and without fear. Have you ever noticed that a touch can say more than 1,000 words? A hand on an arm, a gentle brush along the back, a grounding hand at the base of the neck. These are not mere gestures. They are messages. They are language. Touch, when used intentionally, becomes a way to communicate confidence, care, and certainty without a single sentence being spoken. It speaks to the deepest parts of the nervous system, bypassing skepticism, defenses, and hesitation, and landing directly in the heart and body of a man. Confidence through touch is subtle but powerful. It does not shout or demand attention. It whispers assurance. A woman over 50 can touch a man in ways that say, I am steady. I know who I am. I do not need you to prove yourself to me. This confidence is communicated not through pressure or words, but through calm, grounded, intentional contact. It signals safety and stability, qualities that immediately lower a man's defenses. When he feels this confidence, he instinctively relaxes, sensing that he is not being tested or evaluated and that he can be himself without fear of judgment. Care is the next layer of meaning that touch conveys. A touch can say, I notice you, I see you, I value your presence. Men often receive very few of these affirmations, especially in ways that feel authentic rather than performative. A hand resting gently on the forearm as he shares a thought, a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder in a moment of tension, even a light touch to the hand when he's unsure or hesitant, all communicate genuine care. This care is different from flattery or attention-seeking behavior. It is deliberate, thoughtful, and rooted in presence. Men respond to it instinctively, feeling seen and supported without the need for words. Certainty is the third element that touch communicates. A steady, intentional touch tells him, I am here. I am consistent. You can rely on me. Men are wired to notice reliability in subtle ways. Words can be contradicted. Intentions can be questioned, but the body rarely lies. A touch that is calm, deliberate, and unwavering conveys certainty. It creates trust by signaling that the woman is fully present, emotionally regulated, and aligned with her intentions. When a man experiences this certainty, he feels that he can drop his armor because the energy around him is predictable, safe, and non-threatening. This is why non-sexual touch is so profoundly effective in building intimacy and trust. It communicates on levels that words cannot reach. Words can be analyzed, misinterpreted, or resisted. Touch speaks directly to the nervous system, to the emotional centers of the brain, and to the subconscious mind. It tells him, you are safe, you are valued, you are understood. And because men often have fewer safe avenues for expressing and receiving emotion, touch becomes a form of communication that is almost impossible to resist. Intentionality is what transforms touch from a simple gesture into true communication. A random tap on the shoulder, a hurried brush against the arm, or a distracted touch while checking your phone does nothing. But when touch is deliberate, when it aligns with your presence, attention, and understanding, it conveys layers of meaning. It speaks with clarity and authenticity, sending a message that is simultaneously reassuring, affirming, and grounding. The timing and context of touch also amplify its communicative power. A gentle touch at the moment he is speaking about something vulnerable signals acknowledgement and support. A grounding hand on the small of the back when he is tense communicates reassurance. Even a light, lingering touch on the arm while listening conveys attentiveness and presence. Each touch, placed with awareness and care, becomes a wordless sentence, a phrase, a paragraph of connection that tells him you are safe to be yourself with me. Women over 50 have an advantage here because presence and intention naturally accompany their touch. Years of life experience cultivate awareness of energy, timing, and emotional cues. They know when to step in, when to offer a touch, and when to hold back. They understand that touch is not manipulation. It is a vehicle for communication. They have the patience to allow touch to speak its message fully without rushing, over-explaining, or forcing a response. Touch also creates a feedback loop. When a man experiences a touch that communicates confidence, care, and certainty, his body relaxes, his nervous system stabilizes, and he becomes more open. That openness encourages further communication, verbal, emotional, and physical. Each subsequent touch reinforces the message, deepening trust and intimacy. Over time, this cumulative effect reshapes the interaction, making connection effortless rather than forced. It is also important to recognize the difference between intentional touch and casual contact. The former is deliberate, conscious, and aligned with emotional intention. The latter is incidental, distracted, or habitual. Only intentional touch communicates the layered messages of confidence, care, and certainty. The woman who masters this understands that each touch carries weight and speaks volumes. She does not need to say, I am confident, I care, I am certain. Her body does that naturally through presence and touch. Intentional touch also signals boundaries in a subtle but firm way. It communicates that the woman is grounded and self-assured, that she knows her own space, and that she can engage without losing herself. This clarity is incredibly attractive to men because it reassures them that interaction is safe, predictable, and authentic. Men instinctively respond by relaxing into the space she creates, lowering defenses that may have taken years to build. Touch becomes a language of its own, speaking fluently to the parts of him that words often cannot reach. It conveys empathy without explanation, support without verbal reassurance, and stability without control. It bridges gaps created by fear, skepticism, or past hurt. It reassures, validates, and opens doors to intimacy that may have been closed for decades. Through intentional, non-sexual touch, a woman can communicate her presence, her attentiveness, and her care more powerfully than any speech, argument, or persuasion ever could. The simple act of touch becomes a way to say, I am here, I see you, you are safe, you are valued. And in that space, men feel allowed to relax, to engage, to share, and to connect on levels that are profound, transformative, and lasting. Every touch is a sentence, every gesture a paragraph, and every interaction a conversation that bypasses intellect and reaches the heart. Through touch, women over 50 can speak volumes without words. They can communicate understanding, patience, and trust. They can create safety, evoke vulnerability, and invite deep connection. And the result is extraordinary. Men who have long guarded their hearts begin to soften, lean in, and engage fully. They begin to trust not because they are told to, but because touch has communicated safety, confidence, and care in the most primal, undeniable way. That is the true power of touch as communication. The ability to speak certainty, care, and confidence directly to the heart and body, opening pathways to connection, intimacy, and love that words alone cannot achieve. When touch becomes communication, it transcends the ordinary. It's no longer about casual contact. It becomes a deliberate tool to align intention with sensation. Every movement, every pressure, every pause carries meaning. Men, especially those who have lived years under social pressure to conceal emotion, respond instinctively. They may not be able to articulate why they feel safer, calmer, or more open, but their bodies recognize it immediately. This is the silent dialogue that women over 50 can master, speaking directly to the nervous system, bypassing skepticism, and creating trust before a single word is exchanged. Confidence through touch communicates stability. When a woman reaches for his hand or rests a reassuring touch on his shoulder, she is saying, I am grounded, I am centered. You do not need to perform to earn my presence. That grounded confidence signals safety because he senses that she is self-sufficient, emotionally regulated, and present. Unlike younger women who may unintentionally transmit insecurity or neediness, the mature woman's touch conveys certainty, letting him relax without fearing that he must fix, prove, or validate her. Care is embedded in the subtlety of touch. It's the difference between a fleeting pat and a deliberate, mindful gesture. Men are hardwired to notice these differences. A slow, deliberate touch on the forearm while he expresses a thought communicates empathy, recognition, and understanding. It tells him, I see your effort. I notice your struggle. I honor your experience. This care does not manipulate. It nurtures. It reassures his subconscious that he can let his guard down and be fully present. Certainty is equally powerful. When a touch is steady, purposeful, and unhurried, it communicates that she is consistent and reliable. He instinctively reads this as a promise of stability. You can rely on me. You do not have to guess my intentions or test my reactions. Men are acutely attuned to inconsistency. It triggers subtle anxiety and prompts defensive behaviors. Certainty, communicated through touch, on the other hand, lowers that anxiety and fosters trust. Intentional touch becomes a language that integrates body, mind, and emotion. Words often fail because they must be interpreted, filtered, and rationalized. Touch, however, bypasses these cognitive processes. A gentle hand, a grounding presence, a deliberate gesture speaks directly to the emotional and physical centers of the body. It tells him he is safe, valued, and accepted. Messages that men are often starved for, especially in long-term or serious relationships. The rhythm, timing, and duration of touch also speak volumes. A brief, thoughtful touch can communicate reassurance, while a longer, sustained gesture conveys deeper care and commitment. Each touch is an opportunity to reinforce trust and connection. Women over 50, with their experience and awareness, are uniquely equipped to calibrate these subtleties. They understand that touch is not about quantity, but quality. The right touch at the right moment is transformative. Non-sexual touch, particularly when paired with attentive presence, also communicates emotional literacy. Men often struggle to express vulnerability because they fear judgment or rejection. A touch that communicates confidence, care, and certainty tells him, you can be authentic here. You do not need to hide. This opens a doorway to emotional intimacy. He begins to speak more freely, share more openly, and trust more deeply, all because his body felt safe enough to relax before his mind could even process it. Furthermore, touch communicates boundaries and self-assuredness simultaneously. A firm but gentle touch signals, I am present, I am aware, and I know my value. This subtle assertion of self communicates that connection is mutual, not transactional. Men sense this immediately. It reassures them that they are entering a space where authenticity is expected and rewarded. They can open up without fear of exploitation, ridicule, or manipulation. Touch also amplifies other forms of communication. When paired with attentive listening, sincere eye contact, and emotionally regulated presence, it creates a holistic message that cannot be ignored. Each element reinforces the others. His nervous system relaxes, his mind registers safety, and his heart begins to respond. The combined effect is transformative. Walls soften, defenses lower, and connection deepens naturally. Repeated intentional touch builds a cumulative effect. It trains his nervous system to anticipate safety in her presence. Over time, he learns to associate her touch with calm, stability, and understanding. Even small gestures, a hand on the arm while passing, a reassuring touch while speaking, or a grounding touch during a tense moment, compound. Each reinforces the message that he is safe, seen, and valued. The trust created through these gestures becomes lasting, resilient, and deeply meaningful. Women over 50 have an unparalleled advantage here because they operate from a place of authentic presence. Their life experience cultivates patience, emotional regulation, and awareness. They understand timing, energy, and subtlety. When they touch a man intentionally, it is rarely reactive or impulsive. It is conscious, deliberate, and aligned with intention. This level of sophistication in touch communicates wisdom, stability, and emotional intelligence, all of which encourage men to open, soften, and engage fully. Touch, when understood as a form of communication, is transformative. It transcends the superficial. It reaches the core of a man's being. It bypasses intellect, skepticism, and defense mechanisms. It speaks directly to his heart and body, signaling confidence, care, and certainty in a way that words often cannot. The ultimate truth is this: men respond to touch not because it is physical, but because it conveys meaning. A touch communicates, I am present, I see you, you are safe, you are valued, you are allowed to open. And when men experience this consistently, they begin to trust, they begin to soften, they begin to engage fully, not because they are told to, but because touch has spoken a language that transcends words, judgment, and expectation. When mastered, intentional, non-sexual touch becomes the most effective, subtle, and powerful form of communication in relationships. It carries the weight of presence, the reassurance of care, and the clarity of certainty. It creates a space where men can finally relax, feel safe, and connect authentically. And for women over 50, this is not just a technique. It is a natural extension of their experience, confidence, and presence, allowing them to create profound, lasting, and transformative connection in every relationship. Would you like me to continue diving deeper into the physiological and psychological ways touch rewires trust in men?